Rick, a terrible younger guy, struggles to attend to his ill mom one nighttime. At the same time as making ready meals for her, he notices something bizarre. His mom, at the same time as studying the Bible, abruptly pulls out a gun earlier than Rick can react. She takes her very own lifestyles. 3 years later, Rick remains looking to position his lifestyles again collectively. One morning he arrives at painting's handiest to discover that his task has been given to a person else with none. Cause determined, he turns to his buddy Jeremy, who manages to get him a house responsibilities task at a big mansion at the same time as working there. Rick by chance receives injured and asks the mansion's supervisor, Antoinette, for a primary, useful resource package in preference to assisting. She scolds him, however. Ultimately, we could him inner to deal with his wound. As Rick is ready to go away, his eyes land on a pile of cash, on a desk remembering his economic struggles. He hesitates, however, then takes some notes. But earlier than he can go away, he realizes he's being watched. The mansion's proprietor, George, has visible the whole thing, simply whilst Rick expects to be fired. George does something surprising. He forgives him and fingers him a whole package of coins as a sophisticated fee. That nighttime, Rick discusses his unexpected fortune with Jeremy and jokes approximately what he could do if he had extra money, his first want to get again collectively together. Along with his ex-female friend Tanya, Jeremy laughs at him, disregarding the concept. The subsequent morning, Rick is known as, into George's workplace, the old man famous, that he has no heir, something he deeply regrets. Then he asks Rick a bizarre query: does he trust in God? Whilst Rick says sure, George makes him an unsettling provide. If Rick is of the same opinion, to devour a meal located on George's useless frame after his loss of life, he's going to inherit his complete fortune. Rick is horrified. He assumes it is a shaggy dog story. However, George is absolutely extreme. The antique guy urges Rick to assume it, over-understanding that his poverty would possibly pressure him to agree. Unnerved, Rick begins off-evolved seeking out different jobs. However, each door stays closed to him. Then one nighttime, a messenger arrives at his doorstep with an invite. George has died, and Rick have to come to the mansion straight away on the mansion. Antoinette affords Rick with a settlement. The phrases are easy. If he eats the meal from George's corpse, he's going to inherit the whole thing. But he have to end the complete meal, and he can in no way inform anybody, approximately. Rick hesitates. However, his desperation wins. He is of the same opinion because the eerie dinner is served. Rick forces himself to devour at the same time as Antoinette coldly reminds him to complete the whole thing. As soon as performed, she fingers him a card with George's very last phrases. It isn't only a message, it is a settlement through signing it. Rick unknowingly is of the same opinion to inherit now no longer handiest George's wealth. However, additionally, all of his sins without analyzing, Rick, symptoms and symptoms. That night, time as Rick lies in mattress, an awesome dread creeps over him. He abruptly appears like he is drowning, surrounded through ghastly figures, whispering with inside the darkness. Terrified, he wakes up. However, the horror is a long way from. Over the following day, at the same time as wandering the mansion, Rick spots a mysterious guy gazing him. However, whilst he appears once more, the discern vanishes as he attempts to observe. Antoinette stops him performing as though not anything is incorrect. She reminds him that he is now the master of the house and have to revel in his new lifestyles. To show it, she arms him a vast credit scorecard. Rick, nonetheless shaken, visits Jeremy and gives him cash. However, Jeremy refuses. Later, he runs into his ex Tanya, who asks how he abruptly have become so rich. He tells her it is something higher than triumphing the lottery. However, she stays skeptical that night. Rick is going to a membership, indulging with inside the maximum. Costly liquids, whilst a stranger mocks him. He buys bottles, one for himself and one for the person, simply to show his reputation. But as he returns to the mansion, an unsettling presence lurks inside the shadows. Rick sees a lady, and whilst he touches his nostril, he realizes there may be blood on his face. Whilst he turns lower back, the lady vanishes handiest to reappear seconds, later accusing him of being responsible earlier than violently attacking him. Abruptly, he feels as though he's drowning once more, suffocating beneath unseen forces. Whilst he wakes up, he's at the ground, shaken and terrified. He rushes to Antoinette. Stressful solutions, he accuses her of drugging him, making him hallucinate ghosts. However, Antoinette stays calm. She is aware of precisely what's taking place. Rick insists on rereading George's very last phrases the instant he does the scary fact dawn on him. He has unknowingly taken on George's sins. His soul is now not his very own Antoinette. Then, famous a chilling secret, earlier than his demise, George had emerged as captivated with darkish rituals. He become determined to switch his sins onto a person else, so he ought to escape eternal damnation. And now Rick is the only sporting that curse. After this, Antoinette confirmed Rick a EE book that defined a unique ritual, wherein human beings selected in man or woman to take a seat down on their useless, our bodies, and devour the perception. Become that this procedure could switch all their sins to that man or woman. Such human beings had been referred to as sinine ears. Now, Rick found out that he had, additionally, emerged as a sinine eater. Antoinette defined to him that wealth continually comes at a rate, but Rick desired to undo the entirety and set matters proper. Without losing any time, he went immediately to the church to catch up on his sins. However, whilst the priest requested him what sins he had devoted, Rick had no solution due to the fact the one's sins weren't in reality his. They belonged to Mr. George, feeling helpless. Rick quietly lower back to the mansion. Upon arriving, he commenced wondering. The servants approximately Mr. George, however, none of them have been inclined to expose whatever left. Without a desire, he threatened to hearthplace Annette if she did not inform him. The reality, sooner or later, Antoinette passed over Mr. George's. Police facts and audio tape and numerous confessions. After going through them, Rick determined that Mr. George turned into accused of murdering his spouse, Susan, despite the fact that George by no means admitted to the crime as quickly as Rick. Noticed the case file, he understood that the female who had attacked him in advance turned into none apart from Susan's spirit. With this new know-how, Rick went again to the church and confessed his sins to the priest. The priest prayed to Jesus to cleanse Rick of his sins. However, all through the prayer, Susan's spirit another time attempted to strangle him. Happily, the priest's prayers labored in time and Susan's spirit turned into pushed away. A bit later, Rick obtained a name from Tanya, who instructed him that Jeremy have been performing unusually. She desired Rick to speak to him that nighttime whilst looking TV. Rick sensed that a person turned into status subsequent to his couch, while he grew to become to appearance. A lamp all at once fell to the floor as he approached the lamp. A masked guy commenced chasing him, terrified. Rick ran upstairs, calling out for Antoinette. However, in preference to Antoinette, he encountered a blood-soaked infant. Simply then, Annette arrived and calmed Rick down. She then defined that Mr. George additionally got here from a poor, own circle of relatives and had modified his fate with the aid of turning into a cyanide eater. This supposed that George had absorbed many sins, and after his demise, the ones sins had now handed directly to Rick Antoinette, believed that this cycle might by no means stop the equal issue had came about to Mr. George, and he, sooner or later, took his very own lifestyles to get away the tormenting spirits. Now Rick desired to be loose from all of it. He requested Annette, if there has been. A manner out, Antoinette instructed him that the simplest manner to get away turned into to switch his burden to a person else, who turned into inclined to take it. If he did not, he must go through for the relaxation of his lifestyles. She additionally counseled Rick to revel in his wealth as tons as viable, due to the fact he did not recognize how lengthy he might continue to exist to calm Rick's nerves. Antoinette supplied him a few remedy. However, Rick refused, pronouncing he did not want it. He then attempted to fulfill the priest once more. However, this time the priest did not even permit him input the church that night. Time Rick located it not possible to sleep. So he sooner or later took the drugs Antoinette had. Given him, however, as quickly as he lay down, he commenced seeing spirits round him. He changed into so terrified that he fell off his mattress. At that second, Annette rushed into the room. However, Rick changed into in a trance and noticed his mom status earlier than him, but as he reached out to her, a physician injected him with a sedative, bringing him lower back to truth. Rick informed Antoinette that he desired to take a distinct method, irrespective of how risky it changed into Antoinette. Warned him that even Mr. George hadn't dared to take this step she requested, if he changed into, without a doubt, inclined to surrender all his wealth, to which Rick responded, "I'd as an alternative be a beggar, than stay like this, Antoinette," then requested him if he had a person who could willingly take in this obligation. Rick had no solution, determined he requested Antoinette if she could do it. However, she refused, for the reason that she knew the reality in the back of the deal. She wasn't allowed to take the load herself. She then cautioned that Jeremy is probably inclined to do it. Rick changed into unwilling to betray his pleasant pal. However, at that second, Jeremy, known as inquiring for monetary assist, due to the fact he changed into in deep problem listening to this. Rick at once grabbed a few cash and headed to Jeremy's residence, taking his gun with him. Whilst he arrived, he noticed a spirit begging for assist. In a panic, he shot at it, best to comprehend that it wasn't a spirit. It changed into Tanya. She changed into now mendacity, lifeless earlier than him, inside seconds. Rick's driving force rushed him far from the scene. Annette confident Rick that she could deal with the entirety, and that he had not anything to fear. Approximately, however, Rick had had sufficient, he simply desired to stop this nightmare. Antoinette reminded him that there has been best one manner out. This time, Rick changed into prepared. He changed into even, inclined to skip the curse onto Jeremy. Quickly, Jeremy arrived. He changed into devastated via way of means of Tanya's dying. However, for now, he wanted cash to live, to tell the tale. Antoinette informed him, approximately, Rick's provide to make him a cyanide eater. Rick lay on a desk as docs organized for the ritual. Antoinette reassured him that it might paintings. Moments later, a physician injected Rick, preventing his coronary heart. Rick awoke in every other realm, surrounded via way of means of tormented spirits, crying for assist withinside the crowd. He noticed his mom. However, as he reached her, she converted into Tanya. The two apologized to every different. However, the spirit quickly attacked Rick this time. His mother's spirit stored him the following second. Rick regained consciousness. Antoinette informed him that the ritual become whole. Jeremy had taken at the curse, and Rick become, in the end, loose. 6 months later, Rick had back to operating as a production laborer at some point. He sat on my own, in a park. However, he wasn't. Honestly, on my own, Tanya's spirit become nonetheless with him. Rick had by no means exceeded his sins directly to Jeremy, due to the fact he now not feared Tanya. Deep down, he nonetheless cherished her. Meanwhile, Annette recorded Jeremy's call in an EE book that indexed all of the cyanine eaters again. On the mansion, the spirits had all started haunting Jeremy, and his screams echoed through the halls. Antoinette's expression made it clean. This mansion had visible cyanine eaters earlier then, and it'd see many greater with inside the destiny. In case you loved the video, remember to enroll in the channel, and I'll see you with inside the subsequent one.